Good morning. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about the climate impacts to Washington State with climate change and basically how it relates to the supply of water that we get from the North Cascades. Now, this is a pretty important one because that's basically the business that we're in. We provide over 300,000 customers a steady flow of fresh water and, of course, the associated wastewater treatment services. But it's critical for us to understand how climate change may impact our ability to continue that water delivery. If you look at the prospect of our snowpack diminishment, it's pretty grim. If you look at the projections showing up to the 2080s, they're saying that we may lose between 56 to 70% of our snowpack. Now, that is definitely going to disrupt the water supply in this state. And since we are talking about the Cascade Mountain snowpack, that's going to have a significant impact on the utilities in the areas around the Puget Sound. And that includes ourselves, Seattle, and Tacoma. So this is definitely something that we need to plan for.
How will climate change affect Washington State? If you're wondering how climate change will impact Washington State, you're about to get a clear picture of what's ahead. Let's break it down step by step. First off, climate change is already making its presence felt in Washington. One of the most noticeable effects is the decrease in snowpack. Over the past few decades, snowpack in the western United States, including Washington, has been dropping significantly. This change affects the state's water supply, as less snowpack means more rain and less water stored for the dry summer months. Temperature increases are another major concern. Washington is expected to see temperatures rise by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit by 2040. This warming is causing earlier annual snow melt, which in turn affects the timing of water flow into freshwater systems. This means more water in the winter and less in the summer, impacting hydrological power output, municipal water supply, and even the migration of fish. Wildfires are becoming more frequent and severe due to these temperature increases. In recent years, Washington has seen devastating wildfires that have destroyed neighborhoods and filled the air with smoke. The 2020 Labor Day smoke storm and the 2021 Pacific Northwest heat dome are stark examples of how severe these events can be, leading to additional deaths and health issues. Drought is also a growing problem. 6 of the past 10 years have seen drought conditions in Washington, affecting agriculture, forestry, and other industries. The state is very susceptible to these droughts, especially during the summer months. Flooding is another issue, particularly along the coastlines. Sea level rise is a significant threat, with projections indicating that by 2050, sea levels in Washington could be almost a foot higher than they are now. By 2100, this could increase to 2 to 3 feet or even more. This rise will exacerbate coastal flooding and erosion, affecting over 14,000 homes and structures valued at over $8 billion. The Puget Sound area is particularly vulnerable due to its subsiding land and rising sea levels. This combination makes it more prone to flooding and erosion than other parts of the state. For example, areas like the Skagit River Delta and Willapa Bay are at high risk because their dikes and tide gates can be easily overrun by rising tides. Extreme heat events are also on the rise. The 2021 heat dome, which saw temperatures soar to record highs, is a recent example of how severe these events can be. These heat waves not only harm human health, but also impact agriculture and other sectors. To address these challenges, Washington State has developed a new climate response strategy. This plan, created by 10 state agencies and supported by the latest science, outlines actions to tackle drought, changing ocean conditions, flooding, extreme heat, and wildfires. The strategy includes updating the plan every 4 years to incorporate new science and resources. In summary, climate change is bringing a range of challenges to Washington State, from decreasing snowpack and rising temperatures to more frequent wildfires and coastal flooding. Understanding these impacts and preparing for them is crucial for protecting lives, livelihoods, and the environment.
So I'm going to talk about some of these different elements in a couple of upcoming slides, but what I wanted to show you really quickly was a graph. This graph talks about the snow season, what's basically what we're going to expect when winter comes. And as we learned from this year and incrementally in the last few years, we're seeing a shorter and shorter season of snowfall. And ultimately, that will impact us here in the Puget Sound because between 2010, where this graph starts, all the way out to 2100, that graph continues to go downward. So that has a direct correlation on the snowpack and the runoff that fills up our aquifers as well as our reservoirs. So there's definitely something going on here that we have to recognize will impact our delivery of water in this region into the future. Among some of the most important impacts that we do need to consider is the less water available for our customers. Obviously, that's going to be one of the critical ones that we are going to be focused on. And then also not having water available for first responders, firefighters, medical facilities, those that provide dialysis and so forth. They depend on our ability to deliver water to them on a regular basis. In fact, if we do have a big event like an earthquake here, obviously there will be associated fires and shortages as well. So that's another critical one for us too. And then let's think about the damage to our infrastructure. We have a lot of infrastructure, even with a bit of slight shifting. We could see potentially main breaks happening and all kinds of delivery issues that show up. Heat advisories. We're already at the point now where we're logging the amount of shutoffs that we undertake each year. And then when we do have an extreme heat advisory, we're required now by statute to turn the water back on, whether those folks have paid their bills or not. So that's another critical one for us to be aware of. And then obviously costs associated with source water diminishment. And those are going to be a significant thing for us to address. So there's a lot of potential impacts right off the bat as we see a diminishment in our water supply. It would also be wise for us to consider some of the associated impacts on the increased temperatures in the North Cascades. And a lot of that has to do with the increases in wildfire, concentration of pollutants, especially if we're fighting fires and some of our chemicals leach into the water sources as well. Increased runoff, that once again also helps migrate pollution downstream. And then algae blooms. There's nature's response to water shortages. When you've got heat occurring, you're going to have a lot more harmful algae that occurs in the watershed. And all of that has to be filtered and addressed before we actually deliver fresh, clean water to our customers. Obviously, an important step that we can take is to start planning for the diminishment of water supply too. And we're doing some of that right now. We are looking at our infrastructure and determining where we can improve it for sustainability as well. Constantly talking about water conservation. That's a message that we do deliver on a regular basis, and we work with our partners to make sure that folks understand that there are steps they can take individually too. We're looking at protecting the water source itself, collaborative planning and so forth, working with a number of different agencies, even NGOs and so associations like WASWOOD and so, and then also looking at the rates that we charge, insurance market alignment, and trying to find alternative sources as well. So we're doing what we can to address the changes in the future based on the climate today. Now, I do suppose that in the context of everything we've discussed here, we do have to take a little bit of comfort in the fact that our region might be better positioned than many other regions here in Washington State because we do have the North Cascades. And the way it looks at this point is Everett is projected to remain under 100% reliability for a number of years, perhaps even decades from this point on. And that's based on the current conditions. Now, we do recognize that temperatures are going to increase. But we're going to be able to have a little bit more staying power in this region because we are getting Everett's water through Spada Lake and so forth, and we are using that resource. But there are a lot of other places in the state that will not have the luxury of that kind of a dependable resource, at least projected out into the next half century and beyond too. But we have to consider the fact that the climate may continue to change, and that may even involve some additional impacts that could accelerate the decline a little bit. So we do have to take that into consideration. So I'll move on from this point to the last video, and then we'll open up the floor for discussion.
Increasingly, we're seeing in Washington some extreme heat, and we're understanding how the extreme heat can impact the health of people. We're seeing overnight summer temperatures increase. It's a consistent trend everywhere. The biggest and most recent example, of course, was in 2021 in June. We had a record-breaking heat event where we saw triple digits, and we saw over 400 excess deaths during that heat wave in Washington alone. The snowpack is really important for our region because it acts like nature's water bottle, and it stores the water when we get it, which is typically in the winter. It stores it for our dry season in spring and summer when we need it. And with a changing climate, we're expecting to lose some of that snowpack, so we will have less water in the summer when we need it, and the shift to more rain in the wintertime potentially causing more flooding.
We're expecting about a 20% increase in the biggest events each winter by the end of this century. We're working with King County to try to understand how floods are getting bigger in the future so that they can plan, thinking about risk to people, thinking about consequences to ecosystems. We've seen about 4 inches of sea level rise averaged across Washington state, and we're expecting 1.5 to 2.5 feet by the end of this century, so quite a bit more, a big acceleration. I like it when it snows in Seattle or in the city. And the bad news is with climate change, we're going to have less of that in winter, right? We expect less snowpack lasting into summer at the same time as we expect warmer temperatures, which can also increase the drying conditions. So all of those should play into increasing fire risk now and in the future.
So this year we're expecting to see a weak La Nina develop in the tropical Pacific Ocean. The last time we saw La Nina was 2 winters ago. We actually had 3 La Nina winters in a row. So on average, we tend to have cooler than normal temperatures, a little bit more precipitation, and then more snowpack by the end of our winter season during La Nina years.
I think climate affects almost everything that we do. And what we see as our role really is training and information access and applied research in collaboration with folks who are going to use and apply that information.
At the Climate Office, we work hard to make climate information available for communities and decision makers, whether it's just trying to deal with our current climate hazards or work towards making a more resilient future with climate change.